The sound of refreshing.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Unorthodox Film Podcast, where we discuss movies that meet specific genres, topics, or scenarios, and we recommend movies that we enjoy in hopes that we introduce our listeners to movies that they haven't seen or heard of. With our guests, we discuss movies that we have seen before and engage in conversation based on our memory and recollection of our enjoyment of those titles. At the end of each episode, we roll a dice and select one of the recommended titles to watch together. We will then discuss that film on our next episode with fresh eyes and determine whether the film holds up, as well as explore the film in a more detailed and critical discussion. I am Bradford Clark.
I'm Joseph Quick.
With Joseph, and today we are joined with our guest Tennille Taraszkiewicz. She is an actor and producer here in Michigan. Yes. Most recently, she was in and produced Chasing the Ghost. Right?
Yes.
Welcome. We are so glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I've been listening to your podcast, so I hope I can come up to these high movie standards. You guys are such the expert on all these unusual movies.
It doesn't have to be unusual. Just, yeah, maybe sometimes a little forgotten, but regardless, if you've seen it and you want to talk about it, that's what we want to talk about.
I would say we are more from a bygone, forgotten era, right? So.
Well, you're definitely opening my eyes. I think the movie we watched was definitely something I would not have watched if I wasn't invited to be here. So you're already expanding my horizon.
That's
Perfect.
refreshing.
Perfect.
That's the whole thing.
And what Tennille is referencing is on our last episode, we had Rodney Sizemore on, and we discussed foreign language films. And once we made our list, we randomly selected with the roll of the die Pan's Labyrinth from 2006.
Guillermo del Toro.
Yep, writer-director Guillermo del Toro. So we are going to be starting our conversation off discussing that. Something I haven't mentioned before, I think I'm going to mention here now. If you haven't seen the movie, this discussion is probably going to be very spoilerific. It's kind of hard to discuss in depth the movie without some things getting spoiled. So if you don't want spoilers for Pan's Labyrinth, skip ahead about 20-25 minutes and rejoin the conversation with us. But later on,
come back after you've watched it.
But later on, oh yes. I mean, watch it. Definitely watch it. But later on, Tennille is going to help us make some recommendations for box office failures. Yeah. Movies that didn't meet expectation, and we're not necessarily these are movies that we recommend that you watch. So even though the public didn't decide to get up and spend money on it,
well, like mine are more like box office failures that went on to become like cult classic successes.
Sure.
Whereas I know, Tennille, you said, what was your list?
So I went a step further and found movies that did not make a profit, but they were Oscar winners.
Okay.
So they were established films.
Okay.
And
this is going to be a fun list.
Yeah, so we all went about it a little bit differently. So I am excited. I'm really excited to get into that. Before we do that, Joe, I'm a little hot. Would you mind? Before we get into that, we are going to open up discussion on Pan's Labyrinth. So was this your very first time viewing it? You're saying you wouldn't have watched it?
I never even heard of it.
Okay.
When Joseph called me and was like, it's Pan's Labyrinth. And I was like driving home from work and I was trying to write it down. And I was like, Labyrinth. Oh, okay, with David Bowie?
Yes, you did.
Boy, that would have been a whole different movie.
So I was like, he's like, no, Pan's Labyrinth. And acted like I knew what it was. And I was like, oh, okay, Pan's Labyrinth.
Because I said Guillermo del Toro. I said that. And you were like, oh, I'm aware of him. Okay. And I was like, all right.
Well, and then it's not even the Del Toro I thought it was.
Benicio, right, yeah. No relation.
No relation.
So distant cousins, maybe.
Now that you've watched it, what did you think about it?
Oh, my gosh. Well, first of all, the last year, I feel like life has been so crazy that when I watch something, like I am multitasking.
Yeah.
So to watch a movie that has subtitles, like you really do have to watch the movie.
Right.
And I feel like that drew me that much more into it. So I definitely would recommend it. The subtitles were shocking at first, but then once, you get into the movie, I just think the visuals will put you into the story so deeply, so quickly that you won't want to escape this fantasy fairy tale world.
Guillermo del Toro is just a magnificent filmmaker and storyteller when it comes to world immersion. The way he takes you cinematically and through the art design and costume design and every aspect, every nuance of the film into that world so that you feel it, you see it, the textures there, the lighting, everything, even the camera movement.
I was going to specifically mention the camera never stopped moving. It was always moving. There were a lot of
it's a character in the movie.
yeah, there were a lot of screen swipes, you know, coming down over
Swipe transfers,
a tree stump to come over into darkness and into the cave.
A lot of subtle pushes,
but it's a lot of subtle
dollies,
pushes
or pans that just natural. It felt organic, but as we know as filmmakers, it's so hard to pull that off sometimes.
Well, what I thought it did really well was it reduced the amount of shots, which reduced the amount of editing, so you were forced to stay in the performance.
Dude, sewed his cheek
Yes,
together.
with the I was thinking the same scene.
Shot.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And the acting that went along with that as well was amazing. But that brings up two of the Oscars that they won, which was cinematography and then makeup. So, and then art was the third, which all makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
The set
Doug
pieces.
Jones as Fawn.
Yeah.
And
Swoon,
the
bro,
eyeless
swoon.
the eyeless guy making hands like people.
Yeah,
can
he
see
played
me
both of
doing
them,
it.
right?
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah.
Yep. He was credited as well because
amazing physical actor.
early in the film I was like, I know Doug Jones is one of these characters. Who is he? And it was both.
Yeah.
Because in my mind I thought it was the eyeless guy, but to then also see that he was Fawn was
Right. It had to be Doug Jones who walked all weird like that. You know,
yes, his
like,
entire embodiment of that style of creature. You know, it was a walking tree, a very tiny godlike ent, but the way he moved all of his joints and his hands and the subtle movements of it. There were animatronics on him, you know, or CGI with the ears flipping,
things,
the eyes
they
flipping.
do that a lot, yeah.
But his body mechanics still evoked so much character from that.
Oh yeah, and believe any interview
performance.
I've ever seen, like whoever's operating whatever is doing it off of his movement because he's what brings it to life. So they're like, well, what I'm doing is just like secondary.
Yeah.
Like even those operators feel like they couldn't do it without Doug. You know what I mean? He's a great person to talk to. Go to a con. He's out there. Talk to him. He's just a wonderful person.
Yeah, he seems pretty dope.
Yeah, it's only had 5 minutes with him, but I'm happy about that.
Happy about that 5 minutes.
It was just a pleasant conversation. Yeah.
Tennille, you had brought up you said it was art design that they won for.
Yeah.
And I just think it's incredible. So the first thing I noticed, it takes place in Spain, and I had mentioned while we were watching, I'm not familiar with the topography of Spain. So in my mind, I had said something like Italy, right? Like the dusty with the hills and the horses and stuff. So with the vegetation being as it was, and it completely surrounded that housing area that they were at, it perfectly allowed for that whole labyrinth that design.
Yeah, natural, very natural.
It is, as you pointed out, it's very for an American to understand if you haven't been to Spain, it's very northern West Pacific. You know what I mean? It's like up in like Seattle, like but not in the city, out in the Washington, Oregon. Stuff like that.
I thought too it was 1944, so it really is a period piece at the same time.
It is, yes.
So to be able to take a period piece and it be fantasy all at the same time, I think that's what does tie into just the story and just the fantasy of it all, and you getting kind of sucked into it because it, you know, it's definitely a wartime story, but it's also like this fairy world as well.
Absolutely. So that was something I was going to ask you guys. What is your interpretation of the story of what happened? And my motivation, I mean, I guess I'll let you answer first, but there's a motivation for it because there's a discussion of what people believe that ultimately what happened.
Well, I do feel like it's a symbolic story. I think whenever you have fantasy like that, it does leave a lot of room for interpretation. And so my interpretation of it was it's a young girl that is reborn and has a second chance, to, reconnect with her family and loved ones, but she has to complete some missions or tasks in life. And from there, she I think gets ultimately where she needs to be, but at heavy sacrifice. So I think, maybe that's part of moral of the story is just, without big rewards, there's big sacrifices.
Right. Joe?
Yeah, this that movie was very much, and we had a slight conversation about this earlier, where I feel like Guillermo del Toro is always advertised in the wrong genre or marketed improperly, where he is definitely brilliant at adult fantasy, right? And this one really touched on the childlike nature of that in our own adult psyches, right? Because you want for this little girl, and ultimately it is technically a happy ending if you look at how she experiences death ultimately, right? But when you look at it scientifically, like the floods of oxytocin, like you would have that kind of like out of body experience or a hallucination.
So you're touching upon the other interpretation I was getting to.
Yes, I believe
she died.
I believe that it's a deep. Okay, so the story opens up with she's riding away from home with her mother with her stack of book of fairy tales. She's clutching onto those things like they are her
most
lifeblood.
valuable thing she has.
So every night in this new creaky house, making all these noises, she can't sleep because her mother's sick, tossing and turning, right? So she's having these kind of waking
But
nightmares.
I think it's like it starts earlier than that because she finds that eye when they stop, when her mother's ill on the way in, as you mentioned. She finds that eye and she puts it into the
cement
into that statue, and then the fairy comes out,
which she saw. So, it could be interpreted, and I didn't think about it the first time I saw it. This time I was watching for it because I had heard discussion of it.
Praying mantis
that
creature.
Everything that she went through was in her imagination to help her cope with everything that's going on around her.
That's what I was getting to.
And then ultimately she is dead, but in her mind, as she dies, as you mentioned, maybe she did get that satisfaction because her mother was there. There was no implication that her mother was a goddess in the stories.
No,
originally.
but then there she was blonde instead of brunette, but still there, smiling down as her mother. Yeah,
and that.
So
I just think
it's a
like
child's
it's posited
imagination
as a happy ending
vision of the afterworld.
If it was a real fairy tale,
Afterlife.
if the man, because like even when they burn the mandrake and oh my god, this is coincidence, but there's still a lot of stress. I mean, you got to think what's going on literally outside while this is happening.
There's bombings
she could stress
going on.
birth that like she was already at risk of and the coincidence of maybe her feeling better before it got ultimately
and if
very
you've
worse.
ever burnt a wet engorged log,
It squeals and pops.
Just like the scream. So a root would do the same thing. It's not alive.
No.
Right? It just had all that air or whatever inside of it.
That moisture
So I think that
But I do agree with Joe. I guess I was trying not to spoil it.
Okay,
so yes,
no.
she dies at the end.
100%. So it's the question of whether or not the fantasy was fantasy, or if we saw someone in real life experience real life fairies and in real life be ascended to.
Right, I think it was all her imagination.
Well, I think both can be real though.
So
I
think that's what's beautiful about Guillermo del Toro's storytelling is he allowed you to see both.
Yes,
and you're allowed to have both.
Because the first time I saw it, I didn't because
and there's no right or wrong either.
No,
right,
exactly.
And this was what I love about Guillermo del Toro's storytelling. He's like, you don't have to say yes or no.
Right.
You can just have it.
Yeah.
And see it. Look, watch what like any story he has is it could go either way. He never has a definitive ending, really. It's done.
Right.
But it's
the
left
interpretation
to the
is up
audience
to you.
a little bit. And just enough
which I think is brilliant. That gives longevity.
In a way, yes. And in a way that makes the audience happy. Like,
right, acceptance.
It's your decision.
Yeah.
Right? Not like Christopher Nolan did with Inception, where everybody wanted to argue over, like, did it fall? Did the thing fucking fall? Like, when Christopher Nolan was just trying to say, well, what does it matter? What do you want it to have happened?
Right.
But he kind of, it was taken the wrong way because he's always handed us things.
Yeah.
Guillermo del Toro's never handed you anything.
Right.
He just paints this beautiful picture and goes, it's like a poem, like or a painting. Like, how does it make you feel?
And it very much was. I want to talk about the creatures. We talked a little bit about art, but there were several different plot points where a creature shown up. So 2006. So now we're coming on almost 20 years. Ouch.
I know.
But that was early. That was early in the integration of CGI and so forth. Did you notice a lot? Either of you notice a lot where the CGI came in and versus Guillermo's famous for using his practicals and
I did, but only because he uses CGI so sparingly that it couldn't have been practical.
What effect stood out the most to you as maybe a little outdated?
The map or the book coming
to
life.
Printing in front of her eyes. Like some of that was CGI. Some of it I could see that they were trying to do a bit of transfer. When they got closer to a full page, it was more of an additive dissolve kind of thing that they toyed with in and out of that.
And I like that they didn't.
But I think the CGI was younger at that point, so that's where I could tell. So it didn't age well in that area, but. That being said, it looked great for the time.
I
still
agree.
Pulled it off.
I agree. But that was the one that
only because I've seen better now.
Sure.
I know. Yeah.
Sure.
I think everything looked real.
Right.
Like everything to me felt and looked real to the point where I felt I was in
she
that
was
world.
cringing and looking away.
Yeah.
The guy got his leg cut off. They barely show anything. And
The editing was done very well there.
It's so good. Yeah, I'm not.
Well, and the makeup too. I mean, just
100%.
everything in unison.
No hate
just
on that.
Was
seriously, when he started sewing his mouth, or when she cut it, my knees went a little weak. I had a little twinge there.
So
I got
the
an
one that
upset
stood out for
stomach.
me was when she gave the toad the seeds, and he took that, and then he
yes,
that
puke
out.
it. Yes, that was
puke out was a little. But
all them bugs.
But here's the thing, and it had it was missing a little bit of texture as far as that's what was dated, was the texture look of it. But what saved the whole effect was, it was the dragging out, the coming out, and then it cut to the shot of it plopping on the ground, and that was 100% practical. And so because we only lived in that CGI moment for that extension, to then come into it for her to touch and engage with it, for us to see it up close, that really sold it. Because modern Marvel, they wouldn't do that. They would CGI the whole thing, close-ups and all, and so it would stay consistent, which is fair.
But if it looks crap, it's crap. Let's be fair. We've seen some movies where at least hey, they went for it.
Yeah.
It didn't work, but they went it can ruin a movie.
It can, and sometimes I applaud the effort. So I guess it really just depends on where you're at. If you hear something's got a huge budget and then, they end up putting out Green Lantern, it's like, come on.
Yeah.
Did either of you take any special notice to the musical score?
I did. And actually, I don't know if it was subconscious or what, but I felt like it sounded like Mary Had a Little Lamb, but kind of off.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was but I noticed it before Mercedes hummed it to her. So
it had been floating around. There was that repeated theme going through. It is. It's like do 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 do.
No, and it was Mary Had a Little Lamb.
But then it was the second.
But maybe a Spanish version of it. I don't know.
The second time they dropped down, but she never did say the lyrics. She did say she forgot.
She forgot the lyrics.
So it very could be.
Yeah, but if you know the lyrics and you're singing
along with
their head with the rhythm,
it's suggestive to me.
It fits. And those parts that you might think don't is because in Spanish they pronounce some things a little different, so the rhythm would be just slightly changed to fit those.
I think, and it appeared a lot, and what was really interesting and engaging to me was the different spread of instruments that I was hearing each time you heard the theme, like when she was in the labyrinth, or when they were in the house, her mother's bedside, or in discussion with the fawn in the shadows.
Whoever the composer was, it was floating around the whole orchestra. The whole orchestra had different, it was beautiful.
Very unique sounding instrument. I mean, obviously very fairy tale. Like it felt appropriate in an odd adult way.
Yeah, and familiar.
Yeah. The use of light in this, Joe.
It was amazing. Yeah, it was so good. Like subtle, soft golds and rich tones. Yeah, it was beautifully done. there was probably a lot of gold lame reflectors used to really richen that up. If they weren't shooting through like an orange filter or just doing that in post. But I believe Guillermo del Toro, like his effects, like his art, like his shots. He wants, as best he can get in frame.
Yeah, 100%.
So
one of the things that I found fascinating was the use of day for night.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was night, but then sometimes you could see that it was, because just sequence-wise, probably just dusk.
Yeah,
And
a lot of dusk and a lot of dawn.
But
And really, if you shoot in the middle of the day and you blew that up a bit.
And what clued it to me was the light reflecting off the bushes and the trees and so forth. It was obviously high noon because there were no hard shadows one way or the other. So it was somewhere in that 3-hour span of time you have to get the overhead sun. But it wasn't distracting. I felt it was a strength
they did
because
so well.
I didn't even notice.
but you could see more detail. Like if it were dark and
right.
Right, and a lot of it was outside, so they couldn't.
Because there's no electricity.
Huge,
it was 1944. They didn't have lights outside, so there had to be something. And at no point did we see them holding torches.
That's why I say there's probably a lot of bounces. So like a lot of silver lumery and like the gold for day. You know what I mean? So you would switch that out. And then, like in some of the mid moments, they do have the double checkered, or like you've seen me go through the diff catalogs. Like, where am I going to spend $1,500 today, Brad? Like, because nothing's cheap in these things, and these big movies, they're doing like 20-foot by 20-foot panels of just gold, so the sun hits it and just lights up the whole field. You know what I mean? If you hit the right angle, if you know what you're doing, it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, and it was just gorgeous.
If first off, would you recommend this movie to somebody?
I would, absolutely. Yeah.
What how would you recommend it to somebody? What vibe? Like it's definitely not a horror movie, right?
Right.
How would you describe it to somebody as far as a recommendation?
I would describe it as a movie that you would want to watch when gosh, I don't know. I guess for me, I felt a little sad, and I think that it was because she was going through so much with her mom and, just trying to, overcome her own obstacles. So I do feel like, if you do want to cry a little bit, it's a good movie, but it's also a good movie when you want to just see somebody being brave and strong and overcoming fears and, taking on challenges. So I definitely think that there was like some empowerment and, just perseverance. So I think that I would, recommend it to somebody that wants, kind of bipolar emotions.
Yeah.
And that's what I do like about entertainment. I don't want to stay in one vibe. I want to feel like
100%.
a range of emotions.
Yeah, I would say
100%.
if you're feeling torn and you want to continue that feeling, this is the movie for you, because you're gonna be happy, you're gonna be entertained, you're also gonna be very down and very it takes you on a full roller coaster of emotions, right?
Yes.
And you can look at the movie from several different perspectives, really. And my two favorite, the most obvious, the little girl, which is what we've mainly discussed, but also the character Mercedes,
Yes.
where she is kind of the lost hero. And at one point she even says, "I'm a coward." Well, really, all those people living in the woods couldn't do what she's doing, couldn't face their enemy and just get the intel to help
You bring
people,
up a very good point, and
because she survives and she sees Ophelia die, all this, and she has to go on with the son. And
do you believe this story is actually about Mercedes?
The argument can be made, because it is like her life. Like, it's what happens.
We do see a lot. Until you said that, I didn't realize how much of the story she was in.
And that little girl changes the whole trajectory of their war. They were losing.
Right. Because ultimately
now they win because he's distracted.
We've discussed the fact that, with Ophelia dying, and like, if she didn't really die and she really was a princess, then she's gone on, and that's the beautiful ending. But since
But the reality
is she died. If
all
that's,
those rebels are now left
if that's
to
the
rebuild.
case, the real story is that background story, that beeline story that was going on the entire time, which I think the first time I watched it, it almost felt like a distraction to me to what was happening in the fantasy world. Because again, time I saw it, I thought I was getting into a horror movie. And I kept waiting for the horror to evolve.
And it was distracting, exactly, because that's what she was running from.
Yes.
So it had to be invasive. It had to be like, well, why? I want to see where the labyrinth goes. Why are we back in
Right.
that? And then back and forth, and it's that's the emotion. That's that roller coaster that Guillermo del Toro takes you on with his. He's so good.
I think the only one we haven't really given light to is El Capitan. And while he was an absolute asshat, the guy who performed it,
Amazing.
incredible, because
hateable.
there was nothing.
Such a commendable performance.
Not a moment where I looked at that person
for their performance.
Consistently.
And I've seen him in other things. I can't off the top of my head say them, but it took like that first time after watching this. If you see him, it takes a minute to. Okay, El Capitan. Like to shake that off of him and let him be whatever character he is.
From the moment that he's introduced,
Savage.
coming up to his stepdaughter and new wife who's expecting after their long trip, and his first thought is they're fucking late. And then when they arrive, he's not at all cordial, and the girl reaches to shake his hand with her left hand.
He crushes it
with his right hand. And
and that's it. Like, he just moves on.
As far as a character introduction, though, there was no qualms with where he was on
and that's
on the morality side of things.
Again, the brilliance of Guillermo del Toro, because you are that little girl now. Everyone watching is like, how dare you do that to my hand? Or, you know what I mean? Like,
everybody's insulted.
It's so good, but
it is
But
symbolic.
that's
subtle.
what drags you to follow this little girl more than all the other stuff that, as you said, can seem distracting if you're not really paying attention to. Like, the story is about like what the human psyche does under trauma. Because there's several points of duress. She's leaving her home. Her mother's pregnant, so a new baby's coming.
And
her mother's sick during the
Yeah.
pregnancy, probably going to die, does die. Like, it's so traumatic. Like, this is the kind of stuff that somebody goes through and comes out with DID, multiple personality disorder, So, like, this is, serious, good storytelling. If you really deep dive into, like, the psychology behind it, that's what I love about his storytelling. It's never one layer, two layer. He's an onion. You can peel that apart. You can peel these stories apart like that.
Yeah, it's been a very long time since the last time I saw it, so being able to see it was greatly refreshing. I'm so glad that we watched it. If I remember correctly, this was your recommendation, wasn't it, Joe?
'Twas.
So I don't need to ask you if you'd recommend it.
I already did.
But yeah, I would definitely recommend it. And for all the things that you had said, I would probably mention that it's a fantasy fairy tale, like it's legend, or it's a children's tale,
Sort of
about a child.
But I wouldn't let your kids watch
but
it.
for adults,
100%
for adults. It's violent. It's like Tennille mentioned, it's very graphic.
Yeah,
very
realistic.
It would be a stretch to say. It would
Even
be a
when you
stretch
don't
to
see it.
PG-13, but like.
Even when you don't see the on-screen reaction, although you do, there's plenty of moments where you see wounds opening, but a lot of like the very cutthroat, cold murders, we'll call them, because they were at war, but they were straight up murders.
Yeah.
And
like the rabbit hunters.
The way he did the doctor.
Yes, everything was so cold and it was so immediate. So even in the filming, like, we didn't really see a lot of gore when the rabbit hunters were shot, but the moment was so impactful because of how cold and careless he was about what he was doing. And then to find out that he just killed them to kill them because they were there, but they weren't.
Man in charge with a gun.
They were not guilty for what they were accused of, and ultimately his killing them was a lesson to his soldier to not be so careless, so that doesn't happen. So now that soldier is walking away with those people's deaths on, if he cares. Because I get the idea that those soldiers really, they just liked killing people. So I don't think he was too
he liked
guilt-ridden.
killing people, so he wanted soldiers that liked killing people. Yeah, they were not good people.
No.
Well, is there anything else that anyone would like to say or add about Pan's Labyrinth?
No, man, it's a beautiful movie, beautifully done, every facet of it. Beautiful filmmaking.
Well, then let's get to our recommendations for the night. So as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be doing box office failures. So a movie that during its run of time in theater did not make back what the studio claims to have spent to get it there.
Okay.
And we're going to take turns. And after we do a few here, we're going to take a quick break and be back and finish this list up. But before we do that, Tennille, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
what things have been like for you in film? As I mentioned, you are a producer, actor.
Yes.
So just briefly kind of tell us a little bit about it for people who don't know who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Tennille Taraszkiewicz, and I'm also known as the Film Chick. And I did my first thing in 2016. I was in a short film with some friends at work, and they asked me to be the lead actress, but then they didn't have locations or rehearsals, so I just started doing that because I wanted the project to happen.
The bug done bit you.
And then it was like, oh, you're a producer. I was like, oh, that's what a producer does. So just being in the Michigan independent community, there's, it is hard. And so, and being middle age, it's even harder. So
We got responsibilities.
Right. Yep. Like real responsibilities. So I am a mom.
Starting in the middle of the mountain,
Yeah, I know. But I guess better late than never.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
100%.
So essentially, that was kind of the birth of it all. So in 2017, I started my production company called Tennille T Productions because I started looking around, and you guys are, sort of close to my age. We were talking about, you being on the verge of Gen Xers. But essentially, I realized, gosh, I'm like the oldest person around, and kind of the oldest woman for sure. So, if something happens, they're going to come to me. So I better be proactive. So I started a website and got, production insurance. And then in 2019, that's when I met Joseph.
Yeah.
So that was the run of the short films. So that year I did 6 short films and 2 short documentaries, and we put them together for a bundled premiere.
Yeah.
And,
COVID.
Right. And then we started writing If I Can't Have You, and then COVID.
Lives were changed.
Yes, and then everything changed. So If I Can't Have You was my first feature film, and that's where I met you, Bradford. And then, after that, just kind of got the bug. So I did Chasing the Ghost in 2022. And then in 2023, we all did The Agency, which was so much fun.
So much fun.
I know.
I cannot wait to share that one with the world.
I know.
And y'all better make it do good, because I want to reprise that character.
Yes, Otis.
It's so fun to be that funny.
Yes.
It is so fun to be that funny.
Yes.
So it's safe to say that you enjoy movies.
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoy movies. I'm different than you guys, though. I feel like you guys do like very unique things that are undiscovered and that people need to know about, because I'm more of the realm of traditional movies or blockbusters. So my mom and dad, huge movie goers. I mean, even today, they still buy DVDs. They still go every Tuesday.
You're going to have to go somewhere other than Best Buy. They don't carry them anymore.
Oh, no, I did not know that.
Yeah, it was like last month.
My
Okay.
parents were big, like, Friday nights at Blockbuster, stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yep.
But yeah, I grew my own eclectic taste for different types of movies. Like, I had a conversation with my parents over this Christmas break at our family thing, and I was just raving about Violent Night, right? Because I love this horribly gory, trope-tastic movie, right?
Love it.
And they're just, everybody's, except for 1 or 2 of my cousins and my Uncle Craig, I guess he's a cousin too, whatever. Just like, what are you talking? Like, it's a horror movie. Like, have you seen Krampus? Like, that was awful. I'm like, no, it was spectacular.
Was amazing.
Right? Like, there's just, yeah. So I have tastes that some movies just aren't for people, and they're probably for me. Like,
Right. Well, but I think that there's so many movies out there that you don't even know.
But I also go far and dive deep. I look for, like, I'm trying to find something that I've never seen. Like, I'm still watching movies from the 70s and the 40s. And, just randomly, if I finally if I come across something, I'm like, oh, I haven't seen that in a while. Like, or
Well,
I didn't even
let's
hear
start
that
talking
one.
about some recommendations.
Yeah.
Then. So, let us. Do you mind if I throw over to you, or do you want to wait and be last?
No, I can go first.
All right. So we're gonna do 12 recommendations tonight. We're each gonna do 4. And Tennille, what would be your first recommendation for a movie that someone should watch that didn't make money when it was in theaters?
Yes. So this one on the list is actually one of my favorite movies, one of my top 5, which is Shawshank Redemption.
Such a good movie.
Amazing movie. So good. So what I did learn is that the budget was around $25 million.
Yeah.
And in the theater, it only did like 16 million.
Right.
And so pretty much a flop by that standard. But really, though, the film did become successful, though, on
fast forward 12 years, and it was on every Saturday night on TNT.
Right. And the DVD, yes, right. It was the rental, so it did actually get up to like 76 million. But
video store days, yeah.
So they did attribute that a lot to do with Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction coming out around the same time. Which, if you think about it, those are cult classics. And Forrest Gump is one of my other, top 5.
But
so
that one made money, didn't it? Forrest Gump.
Oh,
that
gosh.
That wasn't a late bloomer.
No.
That was a boomer.
No, that was a
boomer.
That's what I'm saying
is
they took
competition.
Right. They took the.
Did we know? I don't remember. Did we know that
nowadays they would have turned that into a trilogy, and they would have destroyed
it.
Did we know that Forrest Gump was going to be a banger before it came out? Was it something that we were all anticipating?
I don't think so. I think it was a pleasant surprise.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily like, oh shit, we shouldn't go up against.
Forrest Gump, exactly.
Maybe Quentin Tarantino was, but no, that was really his first breakout, like big success was Pulp Fiction. Like Reservoir Dogs did well, Jackie Brown did all right, but like box office wise, Pulp Fiction was his.
Yeah, I think those were surprise hits, and then they also, attributed it to,
The
prison
rebirth
themes aren't like real popular and there were no strong female characters. So they had like all these justifications on why it didn't do well.
Excuses. They're called excuses.
Right, excuses. But then essentially, once it was released based on, word of mouth and just,
That's
people recommending it.
And, the recoupment model was different back then because you had physical release. It's a whole lot different now to make back something as quickly, but with
and as soon as they got
rentals, because rentals were a different purchase.
First-year reviews from Blockbuster, Andy Dufresne knew that he had made the right choice. Sat on that roof like a god, watching us sip his beers because he was sober after all. Sorry, it was my horrible Morgan Freeman impression.
Oh, I thought that was your Andy impression.
That's what I thought it was.
No, who narrates the movie? Not Andy. Morgan Freeman.
Okay, we'll give it to you then.
I said it was horrible.
I can't give it to him. Work harder, Joe.
You can fuck right off.
Hold on, let me close my eyes. Wait, do I hear Morgan Freeman? No.
You should hear God, because he played that with Jim Carrey.
All right, God, tell us what your first recommendation is today.
All right. Well, it was, sometimes I go a little wonky. I let it stir in my brain this time for a while, and I came up with these kind of in the midst of watching Pan's Labyrinth. I whittled them down. And I'm going to stay in the 90s again. I have one that's not in the 90s.
That's fine. But I'm afraid a lot of mine are a bit newer, but...
Well, good. We'll be nice and varied. So this one, we're going to start with the guilty pleasure one, because I am a huge, I love ninja movies, and I love Christopher Lambert. So,
who can't love Christopher Lambert?
The Hunted, which is a 1995 action thriller. Christopher Lambert plays a New York executive that is on a business trip to Japan, meets a lady in the bar, and she's a prostitute, a lady of the night, as you will. But she's on the run, and during their encounter, she's murdered by 3 ninjas, and they also wound the businessman, Christopher Lambert. But he sees the man's face, played by John Lone. I mean, it's just a star-studded cast for 90s. Like, Yoshio Harada is in it, like just 90s kung fu masters.
Yeah.
Right? Just so it's Christopher Lambert basically did an American-Japanese Ronin movie. Right?
Which is fascinating.
Because it was all filmed in Japan. And like when he gets injured, as he's healing, he trains to be a samurai to go and avenge this woman because he fell in love with her. You know, stupid American businessman. But it's just so good. I loved it as a kid. It was pivotal for me. Like I saw this probably around the time I saw Highlander. You know, my dad was a Christopher Lambert fan, and then of course Mortal Kombat came out. And that made me even bigger of a fan because I was like, I play that game. This is awesome. You know? But yeah, The Hunted, it was, let's see, I read that it was like 20 or 30 million and box office was 6.6.
Okay.
And that's like international gross.
Okay.
Like all time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it didn't recover in the rentals.
Even
Okay.
today, no, it didn't even become a cult classic.
Okay.
I believe for me, it's cult classic worthy. Like I watched it again last year because I happened upon it.
I've never heard of it.
Neither have I.
It became free on Prime through like
I'll be honest, your
app,
description of it, like really, like especially being of the 90 era, that sounds perfect. Like ninjas just come out of nowhere and murder someone, and then it was Chris Lambert for an hour and a half.
Yeah, it was so good. Yeah, it's about an hour 45. Yeah, it's perfect little romp. You know, it's dramatic. It's got action, and no guns.
I love it.
It was so good. Yeah,
I love it. So The Hunted, and that was 95.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna start my list a little bit more recent. And while it's very, very recent, I think, okay, so first off, its budget was $144 million. $110 million. Total gross worldwide was 63.5. And I'm telling you that first because that leads me to believe that people still haven't seen this movie. And that's Babylon. Babylon from Damien Chazelle from 2022 with Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie. So here's
I have not seen it yet.
Here's my thought on this. First off, it's 3 hours and 9 minutes.
I didn't see it in theaters. You did.
I did.
I did not.
It's 3 hours and 9 minutes, so it's long, right? So of course we talk about this a lot.
But like Pan's Labyrinth, I've seen that a bunch of times. We watched that today. It was just over 2 hours. It felt like about 2.5. For me, Babylon did not feel like 3 hours. It felt about the same. It felt like I felt like a 2 hour movie.
A quick summary. It is in the golden era of Hollywood, right at the transition point of adding sound. So we're getting into making talkies.
Okay.
Yeah,
and if you're familiar with what happened during that time, that was where beautiful people who just had to smile and behave on screen now had to open up their mouths, and
some of
they
them were
may not have
eloquent.
been. Yes.
Yeah.
Not only that, we had to figure out how do we record sound? How do we? So there. One of my appreciations for it is that there is a lot of technical. So being someone who works in industry, there's a lot of inside jokes from me. But as a lifelong film lover, it is a giant exploration into all of the cogs that go on in that period. And they do that by introducing you to 4 lead characters. Brad Pitt's character is one, Margot Robbie's is another, and then there is a Latin busboy who travels on to his story
becomes a big producer.
I wasn't trying to
we do spoilers. And tune in somewhere else. You want something not spoiled for you.
I want them to watch this movie. I want them to watch this movie.
Yeah,
so no spoilers, Joe.
It's not a full spoil.
It's not. I'm just saying. Either way,
dude gets a job. It's awesome.
So then there's a jazz musician who goes on a journey, and I'm not going to spoil that because they're each of their individual journeys tells a tale that is incumbent upon bringing us to where Hollywood is today.
Yeah, and it's all a lesson. It's all a big inside joke of how things came this way. Like one of my favorites is, I forget who plays the starlet that basically Margot Robbie's character is taking over for, right? And she's very jealous of, and like just, it's every single moment and choice in there is trope-tastic of like a lesson to be learned of how Hollywood grew past this. And it's just so well done. It's so nuanced. I can't wait to see it.
It is, if you've seen other movies by Damien Chazelle, and I've not seen too many of him, I know he's done, he did Whiplash, right?
Yeah,
La La Land. So he's got a very ambitious artistic style, and this cost him a lot of money. Like
choreography.
So another place I believe this movie failed was in its trailering. In the trailer, it was just like Babylon. We all know Babylon from the biblical "Don't fuck up."
Right,
it's just
right.
And in that commercial, in order to sell the title, they sell what is essentially the first 45 minutes of the movie, which is a giant debaucherous party up in the hills,
the 1920s
right?
Hollywood,
and it's very it's very graphic. It's very truthful. It
comes back to what I said about marketing for Guillermo del Toro. Like it was a great movie, but what they presented it to be was not what it was. So people were disappointed because they were misled.
Yes,
right,
exactly,
right.
So yeah, Babylon.
Okay,
I suggest watching it.
Great fucking movie. Yeah.
Tennille. We are going to be doing that. Yep, that's 100% the next thing. You caught me off. But Tennille, we are going to be taking a break. You are going to be coming back and starting us out with the next pick. And just threw my whole flow off here, man.
I'm sorry.
Joe's like, it's fucking time. I got to go.
I just need communication sometimes, and you don't give it.
At the end of the first round of our picks, we have just get to the first round of our picks, so we are going to be taking a break. We will see you guys in just a moment.
See ya.
Welcome back to the Unorthodox Film Podcast.
One of these days, I'm going to figure out how to open this without getting myself and the microphone wet.
Yeah, you always squirt on yourself. Dirty girl.
I don't know. I don't even. It's not even fizzy stuff. I mean, it's fizzy, but like you could shake this and it's not going to foam like a beer. It's water. So we left off with our first three recommendations. Tennille started us off with Shawshank Redemption.
Yes.
Joe brought in The Hunted, which I'm super fascinated about. So hopefully it's available to watch somewhere.
Yeah, I believe you can find it on Prime somewhere.
Okay.
Like, probably for rent or purchase because it's old school. But
yeah, and the distro rights on those have started to fall in some of the older 90s stuff. But then I mentioned our newest pick, Babylon. So that brings us now to Tennille. Tennille, what is your next recommendation for a box office flop?
Yeah, so this is 1998, and it is What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams.
That mother flipping movie.
I know.
So much.
I know.
So much.
I know.
And it was really like one of Robin Williams' first really dramatic roles. He had several later in his career, but that one, it was really at the height of his comedic career. And,
So tell us about What Dreams May Come.
Well, it's been so long since I've seen it. It was 1998. So, I mean, this is like around the time of graduating.
So that's about the last time you saw it?
Yeah, so I've
only seen it once.
I only seen it once, and I just...
Really?
Yeah, and it was with you. So it's recent. I remember it.
I knew I like birthed that movie into your life, but like how, and I say birthed because it's such an experience. That, how could you have not watched it again? Like when I first saw that movie, I probably watched it 5 times, like in a row.
You know what? Because it's a lot. It's an emotional.
Yes, it's sad.
It spoke
really
to me
sad.
on a level that like
It was provocative enough that like it's probably been long enough now that I would absolutely love a rewatch of it. But you know, when it sticks with you. So like going back, yeah, you could go back and watch it. I don't rewatch as many movies today as I did 20 years ago.
Because there's so many more that come out.
Because there's just so many more. Like I'm already behind on the new shit. So it's like so if I recall enough of a story, sometimes it is hard to sit down and take the 2 hours to watch that versus something I haven't seen. But Robin Williams in that movie, if I recall, without spoiling, you know he's
dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not sure if that was a spoiler or not.
No, I mean, like he's trying to find the soul of the lost soul of his soulmate. Like
yes.
she committed suicide, so she's in this forbidden place, and he has to go find her, and all these. It's so romantic.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
It's visually gorgeous.
It's a poem of a movie.
His performance is probably the most impactful timeline-wise since Dead Poets Society.
Mm-hmm.
The emotion that you watch go over this man's face through some of these scenes is just so.
That's what I'm saying. It's too much.
Like
it's too much. It's everything
and I hate,
it needs
I hate to
be.
say this, but I have to say, like, I can understand why he killed himself. There's nobody who could portray that kind of sadness that vividly. That it
just
wasn't
doesn't really feel it. No, I agree.
Yeah.
I do feel like that movie was an outlet for him, but we just didn't know that
And
maybe
I think
there was
that's what
something
really
real
all
there.
of his dramatic ones were lending to his another form of release. Like, because all his comedy was because when you're that depressed, it's the mask to help the rest of the world not feel as bad as you do.
But that's what we loved him for, the character, right?
That.
So
he was brilliant at
we
that.
knew it was a mask. It wasn't like it was veiled as a mask, but it was his mask veiling, his internal.
Yeah, and then he actually got to share that with us in a couple of his movies. And the way he did it in this one is just so poignant and just...
Yeah.
So it did win an Oscar, for visual effects.
Okay.
So, because I do remember all the dreams.
And the visual effects are just...
So those dreams
that was at a
feel...
time, like you said, this was in the 90s, where they were, most of that, like if they used computers, it was very minimal, and it was always a marriage with matte paintings.
Yeah.
Right? So that's part of what led to its beauty, is this was like real paintings that they were making. And the way they married that with the reality of like the afterlife and stuff, where like at one point he's struggling dealing with it being the afterlife, and he's literally walking in paint instead of on ground. Like that bridged that gap, made that connection between it was just so beautifully done.
Yeah.
It did come close to breaking even. They spent around $80 million, and I think it made like $72 million.
Okay.
So
That's
it wasn't
even
like
close.
Even if it hit 100,000, that's technically a success. But $20,000 or an extra $20 million is not a success either.
It needs to get like triple what it.
I would still say something that is 15, 20, 30% above just hitting barrel is still a flop.
But there's something to be said when the most popular movie of a release is something that's so juvenile and benign for made for everybody type humor, that like you have something like this that's so artistic, so poignant, like maybe the droves won't understand it. Maybe it takes the dissection for it to actually reach society. And obviously this was that case where it got the ultimate recognition for a film. It won an Oscar, maybe not for, what was that Oscar for? It was
for visual effects.
Visual effects, right. So not even for the performance or the cinematography. Those were all amazing.
Right.
Like, but in the visual effects, like their portrayal of hell, their portrayal of everything, like just, it was so, the mixing of worlds and I can't even put it into words. You have to watch it. You have to watch it. It's breathtaking.
It's a very hard to describe movie because, like I said, I didn't run to rewatch it because it is a bit heavy on the heart. And if I was someone who loved watching that all the time, which I'm sure there are plenty of people who do, then it's a heavy rewatch. But it's like you can say, something like Schindler's List is a great movie, but no one's watching that every Saturday.
True. Well, there was a time for me where I was kind of down and out, living in a bad place, and all I had for entertainment was my 8 VHSs because most of my shit had been stolen, and my VCR. There was no internet, nothing. This is well before smartphones. I'm living in some trailer park in Podunk, dusty Dust Bowl, Florida, right?
Right.
And I had this on VHS, so I put it on in the background when I'm doing laundry and stuff because the music was great, because the visuals were stunning, and it didn't matter that the story was pulling apart. Now I've seen it 18 times in the past month because I just had it on, wore that tape out. You know what I mean?
Because you used to be able to do that. Could you imagine streaming something out? You've streamed it so much you can't stream it anymore. Just squeeze the tap on that.
It happens sometimes.
Joe, what is your next recommendation this evening?
Next recommendation. Okay. I think I'm thinking I might switch up and go, because the rest of mine I believe are 90s. So let's go to 2018. Mortal Engines.
Okay.
Does anybody
I have not
Engines.
seen it.
Okay.
But you've heard of it.
I'm familiar with it.
Have
I
you heard of
believe
it,
that
Tennille?
is...
No. Right.
Yeah, it was like a giant...
So you have a
I remember
kung fu...
the trailer. The trailer was like a giant moving city or tank or something.
I will get to that. Okay. So this was director Christian Rivers, box office 83.7 million, budget 100 million. So again, just only about 17 million, 16.3 shy, but still technically a flop, right? And it didn't get a lot of pull. Like Brad, you say you haven't seen it, weren't even aware of it. It has what's his name who played V and Mr. Smith in The Matrix, and for V for Vendetta he was V.
Yeah, give me a second. Right, Hugo Weaving.
Yeah, Hugo Weaving. Amazing. He's in that. And it was obviously a British thing. It was hundreds of years after a cataclysmic event destroyed civilization. This one person emerges, blah, blah. But what it is now cities are, as you were saying, are these large tanks. I'm talking about a whole city the size of London on a tank. Right, it's just, and the way they did this visually, was just stunning because it was 2018. So the graphics were great. When they pull out for this wide and you see all these tread marks of all these cities, they're literally fighting by sending out smaller versions of tanks and trying not to collide their whole cities together. You have to see it. It's just outlandish and brilliant. If you love, think Mad Max in London, right?
Okay.
But they don't have these. They're not doing hot rods. They're doing jacked up cities. So the Tower of London and this whole 15 square block area is now raised up on tanks and then when they're in the city, you can tell they're on a soundstage or whatever because London does that so well. But it's futuristic streets of old buildings and stuff, but the imagery is just stunning. The art direction and the costuming, and it's just I fucking loved it. Action sci-fi,
Okay, so I remember it coming out, and I remember the trailer for whatever reason not enticing me to want to see it in theater,
Cinemax or Showtime or whatever, one of my paid subscriptions.
And it didn't look like something that I needed to, really keep my eye out for. And then by that point,
you need to watch this movie.
I just read about it being a terrible failure, and I was like, oh, that movie must be shit.
It just costs a lot of money.
It builds such a grand world, right? And it does such a good job of that the story almost feels secondary. So it takes a lot. It does, because there's like this should have been a series of
another
movies.
thing
This
to
one
me
would have
is
served well as a trilogy.
when I see
think.
something like that, I'm like, oh my God, am I about to get into 2 hours of a blue soundstage and computer
It is 2 hours and 8 minutes. Yeah.
on a blue soundstage?
No.
So there was some.
There's very practical.
Okay.
Yeah, like when they're on the moving cities, you're in the city.
Okay.
Like that's real. That's in front of you. Like
Excellent.
Like there's street lights and like cobblestone roadways. You know, like
Very
it's
cool.
proper British film. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I think it went by the wayside. I think that I don't have it here, like what they went up against or anything like that. But it was based on a 2001 novel, came out in 2018. I mean, there's a lot of great movies in 2018, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, it was
Up
it was a
against
heavy
Marvel
year.
and shit.
Yeah.
You know, and this is a one-off.
Was that also when like that M. Night Shyamalan penultimate trio ending with that was the name of that movie where they brought glass and
Let's
Don't look at me.
I don't remember the name of that movie.
Give me time
Bruce
to type it
Willis.
in. 2018 movies. There you go. I mean, that went up against Player One,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Billionaire Boys Club, Anon, High Life, like all the great Game Night, Tag. Yeah,
That
like
was funny.
the Cloverfield Paradox. You know, like the remake of Overboard.
There was a remake of Overboard.
I
Yeah,
actually
you didn't
seen
hear
it.
about this with Anna? Not Anna.
I actually seen it.
With Anna Faris and Eva Longoria.
Well, here's the
and-
thing. I like Anna Faris. I'd probably watch it then.
Yeah, so
adorable.
in this, if everybody remembers, the classic Overboard was Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. And that's where their like
Whole relationship
started. Yeah,
Oh, really?
So in this remake, it's switched where Anna Faris kidnaps a dude, right? So because they had to appropriate it, so it wasn't too offensive. It's just as bad. It's Stockholm Syndrome, 100%. But again, if you're into that, worth the watch.
Okay.
Like, I'd watch the original.
Yeah, the original was cute.
Because there's more to forgive there because you're like, oh, it was the late 80s. So, you know, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
like if you knew that time, you're like, oh, like this is horrible. But it was the 80s, right? Like Mr. Mom and all this shit.
Oh yeah.
But
hope we
this
get to
Yeah,
talk
but when
about
he
that
made
one
the
time.
this
shoe
one was
closet,
2018.
that was pretty cool.
And it was pretty awful.
So that is
Anna
not
Faris is the queen of awful.
that is no longer related to Mortal Engines. Do you have anything else to add about that?
You need to watch it.
I'm interested.
I can't say enough. Like, there's no way for me to really describe it without talking.
Yeah,
its head
no, I
off.
think that you've said enough. I'm intrigued.
It's good.
You've given me more information than possibly whatever the trailer tried to sell it on, and now I'm motivated now to see it.
So often the trailer is like, don't even watch the trailer.
There are some things where I try to, because I've heard about the movie and I want to see the movie, so I don't watch the trailer. But summary lines have been terrible lately. When I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, what movie is that? And then I read it, I'm like, well, I don't fucking want to see that. And then
yeah.
a year later, I see the movie and I'm like, this was fucking awesome. Like, it could
the
have said
synopsis
so
was
much.
shit,
It
yeah.
was. But my next recommendation this evening is 2001's Wet Hot American Summer.
Oh, so good.
A budget.
Oh man,
A budget of
cult classic. Bro.
this
Instant.
This is going to be $5 million. A gross worldwide $295,200.
Whoa.
You're kidding me, bro.
No wonder why I didn't hear of this movie, but you guys both knew of it.
But okay, well this.
So
they
I
have-
did
there's
not
a-
know
there
about
is
it
a
in
sequel,
2001.
a prequel, and a spin-off series. Okay,
So,
like
I'll tell you.
people love this to like. Oh,
It was a cult. So I did not know
So
anything about
good.
it. It was. I don't even know when I
Comedic
first saw it. But it was 2001, and it was definitely post 2010 before I saw it. And it was something that I'd heard about a lot, and but for whatever reason, the people who were trying to sell it to me didn't sell it to me. And I don't remember how it was actually sold to me. I think I was just finally like, it was probably available when I was clicking through cable. I was
I
like, I'm
don't
gonna
think
watch
that's
it.
a movie that can be sold because if you love it, you're almost, it's a guilty pleasure while you love it. So you're explaining to other people, you're not telling them what you like about it because you don't want them to know the part you like. You're just saying, you got to watch it. Like, it's just,
Wet Hot American Summer is...
Meatballs goes ham as fuck.
It is
so wacky.
It is a movie set on the last day of camp with high school and middle school campers and camp counselors, played by people like Paul Rudd, who is just always amazing. 30.
Yeah.
I think where's the cast on here? It's a huge. Janine Garofalo was huge in that. David Hyde Pierce.
So many people, dude.
It's just it's an expansive cast. Christopher Meloni
at some point, like,
and it's a lampoon.
The cook, the guy from
that's the guy from Bob's Burgers, the guy who becomes the can.
Yeah, the guy.
That's the guy from Bob's Burgers.
Yeah, and wasn't he also on Law and Order?
Oh wait, no, that's Christopher Meloni, the crazy guy.
Yeah,
that's
guy.
Christopher Meloni,
not the guy who becomes the can, the actual cook.
Yes.
Yeah.
So everybody's playing is older than the character they're playing.
Amazing as a character, comedic actor.
It's a play out of the last day of camp, and it's done very much in the spirit of like an 80s teen camp movie. It's very funny, but it's also off the rails, like Joe said, like a Meatballs. I mean,
wacky
it's
fuck.
Like I said, someone gets turned into a can of beans, right? So, and then, like Joe mentioned, Netflix picked up the property for it, and then it's probably when I watched it was probably like, oh, Netflix has it, let me just watch it.
They pushed the fuck out of it for that series.
And then they made a prequel of it. Oh, it was the reunion first?
I don't know how
there's two of them. So one 8-episode series of, so we started with the last day of camp, the first day of camp, and one is a 10-year reunion.
Okay.
This was made...
Yeah, the first day of camp came first, for sure. So the movie in 2001 was the last day of camp. And then all of a sudden we have the flashback that explains everything.
Okay.
And then you go...
But everyone's even older, so they
yeah, like they're doing the first day, and everybody's like 12 years older, 14 years. It's so fucking funny, like because they don't skip a beat. Like they're every actor is so happy to go back
just
to that character.
Like,
that's awesome. That's really what it is. Like you're having fun
our
watching.
Experience in the agency,
right?
But at that level of like these people, oh my god!
It's like
if you don't have fun watching this movie, I don't know what's wrong with you.
And like every actor. Or writer from that show, the comedy sketch show back in the 90s that I always tell Brad about, he can't seem to remember, is The State. All those people are involved in it. It was one of their, it's just fucking amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, so good.
So what's the name of it again? I missed
Wet Hot American Summer.
Wet Hot American Summer, okay. Yeah. And it's on Netflix.
Probably still, I'd imagine, because they still own the property.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
it's
start with the movie.
It's like a quick 90 minutes, I think. I don't think it's very long at all.
No, it's
so it's a perfect movie to be able to just sit down.
Terrifically to the point and just ridiculous. And if you want to watch anything after that, like all the jokes stem off of that first movie.
If you feel like you could use more time with these people, then try the first series.
But the way they do it is just...
Because again, it's very tongue-in-cheek. They know they're all 12 years old.
Absurdly intricate.
Yeah, playing is supposed to be 10 years, and they're all like 15 years old. It's just... And they were too old for the parts in the first place. So it's just... It's so much fun.
It sounds like
Do you want to go naked in the boat, Nancy? You're like...
All the tropes. It's very tongue-in-cheek. So that brings us to our 7th pick of the evening, which belongs to Tennille.
Yes.
Please have a drink first.
No, I'll hold up. So my 3rd pick is Almost Famous. So that was 2000. And it basically had a budget of 60, and it brought in about 47.5 million.
Speaking of Goldie Hawn, let's bring in her daughter.
Yep, I was just going to say, yep. So small world there in Hollywood. But
is there a nepotistic reason for that?
Well, no, I'm just saying. So anyways, I do remember that movie. I had... just graduated from college and started my first big girl job. And I thought it was awesome. And I do think it was pretty much the introduction of Kate, at least to me.
Yes, that was one of her.
And so I thought
roles,
she did a, really good
if not
job.
you're right. Yeah, she was amazing. And it was a great rendition of how magazine and rock and roll culture kind of controlled the youth of that era.
Yeah. It was mainstream media back then.
100%.
Now with phones, I mean, you can have an outlet
100%.
anywhere, but back then there was only so many outlets.
Yeah, and it was a way to have conversation. It was how you found things out, because even you had sometimes like Hollywood, the half-hour television magazines, you could get some news, but otherwise otherwise it was your specific, and rock and roll was something that wasn't covered on the nightly news. So the magazines like, was it Rolling Stones?
Rolling Stones.
Yep. But the plethora of other magazines, that's how music grew back in the day.
There was Punk magazine that was basically based out of CBGB and some guy who lived up the street from that. You know what I mean?
It was always. I just watched
these
something.
Things that were very neighborhood driven. Yeah.
I watched a documentary recently about 90s thrash metal, and a lot of their success was due to somebody who published their own magazine that listed an ad in the back to allow people to sell their CDs or tapes at the time, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was just people, like, I went to a show, I recorded, and then I'm sending it for free, and they just traded tapes. And that,
the tape trading thing. Yeah, dude.
But it was, journalism was a different thing back then. And to
technology,
have a movie that Cameron Crowe, who loosely, I believe it's telling him his own story, right? The writer-director. And
to a point,
to a degree, like loosely.
Very dramatized, yeah.
But I feel if any of that is true, it's seen on screen, because the on the road life and the interaction.
I am a golden god.
Is so. You do feel like that this is believable. Like, this isn't Hollywoodized. Like, it can be this fucking crazy.
For it to work, it had to be all these grandiose things that happened throughout his career, kind of nestled into this first coming of age story, right? So, like, if you like, it says based on true life. If you look back, like, throughout the whole tenure of his journalistic career, there are tidbits told about some of these stories that he dramatizes for this movie, right? If you really go back and study it, and that, like, ultimately comes to, like, the collection. If you look at the psychology of it, it was about the extortion of youth culture that corporate America at that time was doing to these outlets, to journalism and rock and roll, right? Because what the kid's 15. And he writes a cool story, submits it, and now they're just taking him out. His whole educational trajectory is thrown into, like, whatever hiatus, and if he doesn't pull off this story, he's not going to have anything to go home to.
Well,
I mean, his
how
parents,
many new experiences?
but
All of a sudden, new experiences at how old? He was 15.
15, yeah.
If we were all subjected to that at 15 years old, it's like, how do you you don't even know how to handle this? Like, you don't belong there, so there isn't protocol for you. So you're figuring it out.
And when you got girls that tempestuous and meat that supple, if you will, they tend to, it happens
it's an
in the
impressionable
movie.
age, we'll
they
say.
don't even take advantage of them, but they tease him at it, and they it's
regardless, like you said, it changed his mental trajectory from
100%.
the start of that trip to the end of the trip. His whole life
would never be the same.
What he thought he was doing tomorrow is something completely different.
Yeah.
So Almost Famous also won an Oscar.
What were the Oscar one?
Best screenplay.
Well done. I mean, I think it was a solid story. Yeah.
The writing was amazing, at least the way it came across on screen, right? Which there's always whatever gap in every, sometimes it changes, sometimes it's, you got Kevin Smith yelling at Seth Rogen, like, I know Judd Apatow told you to improv, but you don't do that on my set. There's all gauges in between as well. So,
if I remember the soundtrack, the music in that movie was pretty fun too.
It was, yeah. And, man, my favorite. I love Jason Lee, right? Like, and he was in that as one of the guitar players. Almost unrecognizable because he's got the long hair.
Yeah, I wouldn't have. That wouldn't have been a movie I would have pulled out of my
push
Jason
broom
Lee
length Fu Manchu. You know what I mean? And just because it's so out of his realm of what he's done as an actor before that. And yeah, I love. I mean, I've been a Jason Lee fan since he was a professional skateboarder. So. Little biased. I love you, man. He's a lot of fun. He's talented, yeah. And there was a lot of good acting in that. There was a lot of fun had on that set.
Was there anything else that you wanted to add about Almost Famous?
No.
Joe, after you get your mouth wet there, it is your turn.
Okay. Well, I'm on overboard over here. Okay, so 2 left, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm going for the gut. 1999, one of my all-time favorite movies.
I'm typing it down.
Fight Club.
I already typed it down.
Edward Norton, Brad Pitt. Just, David Fincher directed. It's just so good. Chuck Palahniuk, one of my favorite authors. Read more, people. Look up Chuck Palahniuk. Read every single one of those books.
I've not read all his books yet, but I love his stuff.
All of them good.
Fight Club is one I've not read yet.
You read that motherfucker because the movie's great, but that book will twist your head up, bro.
Yeah, I've heard.
And so box office 101.2 million, but it was like 160.
Yeah,
130.
it was a flop.
So
Jeez,
again,
why do you
not
think
all
the budget
that far
was
off.
that much?
So there was a lot
They
of.
filmed on location in almost every major city in America because he was literally flying around, and it was just Ed Norton and Brad Pitt that had to go. But
There's a fair amount of CGI that's hidden pretty well, but today you probably see it really well.
Yeah.
Fincher did a lot with his CGI graphics, but I
feel like it was just a lot of guys like in.
Yeah, okay, so ultimately Fight Club is about a depressed man, Edward Norton, suffering from insomnia, meets a strange soap salesman, Tyler Durden, Brad Pitt, and soon finds himself living his in Brad Pitt's squalid house after his apartment blows up. And this is all in his head, okay? He's suffering from DID, multiple personality disorders, and doesn't know it because he's undiagnosed, and he's going through all these things. And it's just...
It's mind-blowing.
It is...
So, first off, it's a movie that you have to see this movie.
It's a social
have you seen
commentary is what it is.
I did see it, but I mean, it was back in the first year it was released, so it's been a while.
If I could sum it up in anything, it would be a line from the movie, and then, Brad, I will let you take over, because this is really... all I have to say at this point about this movie is a social commentary, and it says, we are not our father's children. We are the forgotten generation of history. We have no great war. We have no great depression.
That was in the movie?
We are the middle children of history. Our great war is a spiritual war. And then he goes on to talk about consumerism. And it's, so talking about how with technology, with separation of, not church and state, but like food and mouth, really. Yeah. Because we don't farm, we don't kill, we don't do anything for our own survival anymore. We're fucking consumers, and that's what this movie's about. Yeah. It's a commentary on that and how fragile the human ego can be when pushed against its own natural stimuli. Like, to be stuck in this corporate world that your body knows does not feel natural.
Yeah. I don't want to step on your
No, that was it.
I want to add perfectly to what you were saying there, in that I agree with everything you were saying, and I think it's also a hard-pressing, truthful look at toxic masculinity.
Yes, it shoves chauvinism down your throat and shows you why it's so wrong.
when it came out, I don't remember it being misinterpreted. That could be because I was young and maybe, not understanding what was happening around me.
Yeah.
I didn't misunderstand it the first time I saw it. It was pretty fucking clear to me.
Right.
But in the years since, when I was in Specs Howard back in 2008, a lot of my classmates were young. So I was 28, 29 years old, and they were 18, 19, 20. And so the easiest thing for students like that to talk about is film, have conversations like this. And when I brought up Fight Club, not a one of these people had seen the movie. I'm like, whoa, are we really,
Just a
are we
10-year
there?
difference,
Are we
yeah.
there yet? What? So, but more recently in the discussions I hear about it, is that it had been adopted by like the frat boy, like, because it's about like, oh yeah, I want to be a
They're
badass.
seeing it
Like
the wrong way,
they're
yes.
looking, heroifying them when the whole point is that's a piece of shit. You don't want to be that,
Right.
They're giving the Tyler Durden character infamy rather
Right.
than villainy.
Right. And but I believe it's a movie that must, in order to see the movie in completion, you have to see the movie twice, whether you see it real
100%.
close or not. But because the first time you see it, there are so many things that are built up that once you have the answer and you go back and watch, you're like, whoa,
Yes, right, right. Yeah.
and that's
should
the
do
other
this
piece of the
again
puzzle.
sometime.
And it's just you have fireworks in your head. Good fucking pick, Joe. It was going to be my next pick, so I was trepidatious about it. So I'm glad you did.
No,
because
I have another one that's great, but
here's the thing,
I had to be the one who brought that one.
I was going to end up not doing it. I was like,
Why would you not do, dude? Okay, anybody listening, if you don't know about Edward Norton and Brad Pitt in Fight Club, Jax Colin is very disappointed in you. Okay, watch the movie to find out what I'm talking about.
so it's so quotable, and yeah, don't misunderstand it. Definitely, it's a book of don't be.
I am Jax Colin. I get cancer. I kill Jack.
I kill Jack. So my next pick is pretty similar in tone, and it looks like year. You said it was 99, right, for Fight Club?
99.
So also in 1999, something that cost, I have to scroll back down, I believe it was $6 million. Worldwide gross was $30,471.
Flop a doodle doo, bro. Floptastic.
The Boondock Saints.
Fucking love that movie.
The Boondock Saints. Okay,
I
so
quote that
this
movie
movie,
daily.
this movie,
Hallelujah, Jafar.
I don't know where it stands in current oeuvre, so I don't know
What the fuck, idiot?
if younger viewers have gotten the Boondock Saint bug or if it came and went with Hot Topic. I don't know.
No, I
But
believe
Hot Topic
Norman
is what
Reedus' resurgence in
probably
The Walking
kept it
Dead.
alive.
Yeah, and I think that's the only reason we got a shit fuck sequel.
was a shitty fucking sequel.
And Judd Nelson, how fucking dare you?
So
I love you, and you ruined yourself.
The Boondock Saints, if you don't know, is about two Irish Catholic brothers who end up in some precarious situations that end up causing them to make some very serious decisions that ultimately make for a shit few days. And that's I'm baselining it because I don't want to ruin any story beats from it. It's fun, it's violent, it's vicious,
It was
it's
refreshing.
vulgar, but
it was a new take on action movies in the 90s.
and
It
let
was
me
so
tell
good.
you, one of the coolest, sexiest, most badass sequences with Willem Dafoe that you'll ever see.
He has several of them. Yeah, man. He gets down and dirty.
He plays the cop that is looking for them.
The specialist
amongst,
FBI, yeah.
Amongst all of the things that are happening.
He's a specialist on mafia and controlled crime, organized crime, and he is just blown away by what's going on and like the visceralness of like where like this pushes him as a lawmaker and in his moral mind and his. It's just so good.
Yeah.
Have you seen this?
I've never even heard of it. Again,
Really?
you guys, I love seeing
No,
you
but that's
too,
a good
'cause you,
reaction.
You're like both like, oh my God, this movie, and it only made like $30,000, but yet you both know about it. There's probably 100 people in the U.S. that knows about it, and I'm here with two
There's
of
a
them.
whole cult class.
So what happened was
yeah.
Hot Topic. Hot Topic. I think because it's tanked in the theater, it needed distribution. You know how difficult distribution can be. So whom they found put them on the shelves at Hot Topic, and that turned out to be an awesome thing because then it became like the
merchandise,
the alternate
T-shirts
Right.
and lighters. I
Yeah.
have the lighter right here. Like, I mean, this is a Zippo that has laser engraved, but this is the prayer from that movie.
Right.
Like, and quite honestly, I pulled this out and gave it to an actor, and he felt bonded to me because of our love for the movie, just like that. Like, it touches people's lives, man.
It's a lot of fun.
Some
Sean
corporate
Patrick
salesman
Flannery
took 10
Sean
years
Patrick-
to write a film.
Yeah,
and
Sean Patrick Flannery and Norman
Duffy.
Reedus are amazing paired together.
Billy
You've got
Connolly
Billy
is
Connolly.
iconic, bro.
Billy Connolly comes in, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And who played Papa Joe?
I
Fanculo.
will tell you.
So good. Oh man.
Oh wait, have I moved on
And
to a
then
different
Judd
movie?
Nelson came in on the sequel to replace him as a mafia lord, and it was horrible.
It was terrible.
Judd Nelson.
I
how
will
dare you.
probably never watch the sequel again.
Right, and that's a shame because the guy that got to do the sidekick role, which was awful, I love him as
Talking
an
about
actor.
Rocco?
No, Rocco was in the first movie, right? He died, right? And he does make an appearance as a spirit, whatever. That was awful too. But the guy they got to play like the Mexican guy as the sidekick in the second movie, he's an amazing actor, and he's been in so much. One of my favorite things was him as the Border Patrol officer in Babel, or also in Rules of Attraction. He played the coke dealer with
I don't know.
James.
There's a few
Vanderbeek.
people that don't have pictures on here.
Regardless, I love him as an actor, and he did a great job being this piece of shit sidekick. But it was a shitty role. Like,
Are you talking about from the first movie or the second
movie?
Oh, well,
From
I'm
the
sitting here
fucking
trying to.
sequel,
We're not
Mexican
talking about the
guy.
second movie. Let's move on. Let's move on. I'm sitting here looking on the first cast list, and you're going into it. That's fine. We'll talk about that another time. Maybe
will.
movies we
Let's
don't
move on,
recommend.
move on.
Tennille.
Okay.
Next one.
Okay.
What's the final recommendation?
My final recommendation is Inner Space.
Interesting.
Dennis Quaid.
Yes, and Meg
Martin
Ryan.
Short.
Yes.
I love that movie so much.
Oh my gosh, it takes me back to my youth. I was probably 10-ish
Yeah.
when it came out, and it just seemed like such a cool movie, at the time. And again, I think if I watched it now, like the special effects would be like, ugh.
Oh no,
That's rewatchable.
Honestly, I rewatched it about 5 years ago.
Oh really?
It's
Okay,
rewatchable.
still
good.
Oh,
it
for
holds
sure.
up. Yeah, like
The
And
test
especially
of
if it's the
time.
first time watching
it was cheap blue screen, sure, like it was 80s blue screen, but they used real intravenous camera footage. Like that was actual interior human bloodstreams. Like it's really interesting.
Yeah, but I thought that was like a super, cool movie growing up. And essentially it was a budget of 27 million and it made 16 million.
Wow.
So yeah, it did not do
a lot of like building the ship that he was in and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, trying to stay on theme, they also did win an Oscar for visual effects.
Nice. I did not know that.
So I do feel like these movies with high budgets, they did achieve, what they wanted to visually, but I guess the audience, it doesn't translate in exactly how much they'll pay. But yeah, that was just a child favorite, that we watched, multiple times.
I did. I loved that as a kid too. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
the robots in the beginning, like.
Yeah, just everything about it. And then I think the whole fact that Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid ended up together just seemed like a fairy tale too.
So
Right,
did that come? Okay, that came from that.
I'm going to assume it
Yeah.
did.
I mean, usually it is like that.
Yeah, right.
Meg Ryan's a lot older than she'd like you to believe.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? She's hanging in there pretty well.
So
Good for her.
It is my turn now?
It is
We're
your
done?
turn.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Cutthroat Island. If you like pirate adventures, 1995's Cutthroat Island. Gina Davis, Matthew Modine, Frank Langella, who's just amazing, and Christopher Madsen. There's a bunch of people in it. It's good. It's a pirate captain dies and his daughter inherits the galleon, and they go on a treasure hunt because she has a third of a map and all this. It's good. It flopped a lot because it was like a lot of rewrites and recasting and stuff during all
problems.
That. And
What
hard
year was
flop.
it?
95.
So when I was researching for this, that came up a lot, and I was like, man, I've never heard of this movie.
You've not seen it?
No.
It's
just
really
the fact
good.
that I didn't think other pirate movies existed. So just the fact that another pirate movie outside of the Caribbean, it already has me hooked.
The caves,
no
treasure
pun
hunts.
intended there.
No, but it's so good. It really is. Like it's better than it should be with what you hear about it. Like even when you watch it, like you can tell there were problems. But everything was ready to go, and then there's just people who aren't really familiar with their lines. Like the camera movements are great.
No.
Some of the stunts are kind of wonky because somebody didn't get hired on at the right time.
But it's Gina Davis.
And I love it.
I love Gina Davis. When you come back, would you grab the dice from the top pocket?
Yes.
Appreciate you. So while Joe takes a quick break, I assume that means he's done talking about Cutthroat Island.
Yeah,
so
watch it.
I will, and you've not seen it?
I have not even heard of it.
Me neither. So we can't talk about that.
No, so we can't talk about it.
So
what
we'll
do you
move on
have?
to my last pick, and I am going to go with another. I guess this is my theme today because this one didn't do well either. A budget of $24.5 million with a gross worldwide of $15.5 million. So about a $10 million loss, and that was in I got to scroll back up, 85, with Ridley Scott's Legend.
Legend.
This is a movie with Tim Curry as Darkness, or pretty much the devil. He is in full-on big red suit, horn, like it was a whole makeup to do. It's got Mia Sara and Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise, I believe, was let me tell you how old he was. So in 1985, he was born in, we'll have to do some quick mental math. He was born in 62. So 18 years old. So
just a baby.
Youngin'. And he plays like a, I don't want to say he's a fairy, but he's a fairy creature.
So it's
And Mia Sara is a human that he comes across and has an attraction for, and unicorns are involved. Her kidnapping is involved, and little goblins are involved. It's a children's movie that, I mean, it's remarkable. If you enjoy things like Neverending Story. Or top pocket. No, top, very top. Grab the hang. Yep, that little guy.
I got you.
Yep. Dark Crystal. It's Last Unicorn type stuff. Like it's a very fantastical. We can use that. That works fine. Very fantastical. The set is obviously all done on a sound stage, but that makes it glorious and fun because it's a fantasy tale. But ultimately, the number one reason that I would ever recommend this movie is because Tim Curry as Darkness is the most fun I've ever had with him. He is so huge and boisterous and terrifying in this little tale. Yes, sir.
Oh my goodness.
Yes,
Legend.
sir.
No, unicorns and Tom Cruise. You had me sold on that.
Tom Cruise with light blue eyeshadow.
Yeah, he said he's like a fairy. So I was like,
such
whoa.
a fairy.
Yeah. So
Fabulous.
I'm going to have to find
this.
it.
So good. If you've not seen
Legend.
Legend, wow, yeah.
Yeah, I hope
that was
it's
a
available.
flop, really? I did know that.
Yeah, well, so what did we say? It was about 10 million. Yeah, it was 24.5 was budget and 15.5 was its return.
And
so
Tim Curry was just.
Yeah, and here's the thing with my last pick. I had a really hard time because there were several Ridley Scott movies that could have qualified, and I was trying to figure out which one I wanted people to watch the most, and I feel like I'd have wasted time talking about Blade Runner.
This one was rough for me too. Yeah.
That one's hard for people. Like Blade Runner's out there. There was just a sequel, which was also eligible, but people know it exists. As far as a movie that I wanted people to that know exists, but you need to watch. You've been told to watch Blade Runner. If you haven't, you're just being stubborn. Watch Blade Runner.
There was quite a
Legend
few movies.
It was hard. So when I run into it, I had not seen it until I was an adult, and I ran into a copy of it on a trip to New York where I went and hung with my sister who was living out there, and we were in my first time in Times Square, and I stepped into some media, like 3 stories CD DVD store. I was like, oh
Yeah.
and I found that, and see Legend. Highly
I'm going
recommend it.
to. That's the
Highly
one I'm going to
recommend
take
it.
away.
Joe, where did those dice go?
I got it right here. You got everything all numbered up? Or
we're good to go.
Are we going to do some honorable mentions or anything?
We will definitely come back to that. You want to do that first? No, let's do that first.
It's whatever you. Yeah,
no, let's do that
first. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Tennille, what were a couple of other movies that you might have considered?
Didn't quite make the list, but almost made it.
So again, kind of sticking with the Oscars theme is The Abyss.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah.
So,
Harris.
Yep.
89. Yeah.
Yep. So that was
movie.
89, and that
dome.
and you were right on. And so their Oscar was visual effects.
Okay.
So again, I think that was
Underwater
the theme.
and
Yeah.
it was so good. Yeah.
So The Abyss that's Cameron, right? James Cameron?
James Cameron, yes.
Very first time that CGI was used.
Yeah. Yeah.
Correction.
Groundbreaking.
Correction. That type, because I actually think
for underwater. Right.
Labyrinth was the first thing. The owl was the very first CGI. So I misspoke on that.
It's a little different.
But there was it was known for
was still groundbreaking.
It was known for 3D
it was
or
on
something.
Another level.
Yeah,
Completely different.
But every movie Cameron does, he invents something new for film. Him and Lucas.
It's his ambition, honestly. Like, and what he does between films, like he's very active in the scientific community,
and documentary,
archaeological and explorer community, and he's actually just an inspiration as a human being outside of a filmmaker.
Yeah.
He's gone lengths just for humanity.
Yeah.
It's nice to know.
So were there any other titles that almost made your list today?
No, not
Joe?
today.
I'm with it. Okay, so Children of Men, Clive Owen, based on a British novel, just an amazing film. The cinematography, again, a world immersion, the way you feel like this is the end of the world and this baby's life is everything, right? The Big Lebowski. But
I had it on my list and I took it off because it did make a little more than failure, but it was a little...
Donnie Darko.
Oh, nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Very, very much made its money back in post, like from people buying the movie, not even streaming it. Like, nobody went to saw it. Everybody bought the DVD, right? And just there's plenty more. Like Mars Needs Moms, which is an animated one that my daughter loves. That I just happened upon once because it was free, and she fell in love with it. And I was like, this is like intriguing. This is it's an odd story. Yeah, it's just really good. Sorry, I got a burp. My bad. Citizen Kane was, anyways.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention Citizen Kane.
A lot of some of my favorite movies, Mike Judge did The Office Space and Idiocracy.
Both on my list.
Both were flops and just amazing social commentary movies.
Yep. I didn't mention those because I feel like we'll definitely be able to come up with a topic.
Oh, we'll
be
get
able to
there,
talk about those.
But one we kind of mentioned, or at least that Matthew mentioned, Matthew Santia back when he was on, Heathers.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Heathers was a flop. And this one, because it's... I got 2 more. Let me say
I would say your list is getting long now.
No, I got 2 more. So, because we all love the late, great Tim Curry, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is a huge cult classic. Like, people still get together and, reenact that while it's airing.
That movie has probably made more money for other theaters than it ever made itself.
Right, especially independent dying theaters. They get to stay afloat just by letting drag queens go on stage and be Frankenfurter. But the last one, and I will end here, The Adventures of Pluto Nash. Eddie Murphy movie.
I knew that was a flop. I didn't know it was
because-
worth recommending.
It is to me because I love sci-fi, and it is a good science fiction movie for the time it was made. Now, I feel like Eddie Murphy did it because it was a contractual obligation thing. Like, you can definitely see that he phoned in some stuff, but everyone else involved gave it their all.
Okay.
It was better than Truckers from Outer Space.
I saw that one.
Ethan Hawke and
Yeah, no thank you.
Hookers
Dennis,
from outer space.
Dennis Hopper. Yeah.
So I had considered, like I said, several Ridley Scotts. Kingdom of Heaven and The Last Duel were two that I was heavily considering.
The Last Duel was on my list too.
I
But I knew
opted
you were
out of
gonna-
it.
Yeah.
I opted out of it because I wanted to go with Babylon, and I didn't want to do
Babylon is. I mean, they were both good, but Babylon's such a better movie.
The Last Duel is such a fascinating story in
really
the way
is.
it's told, and its performance is so very well done. And Kingdom of Heaven is right there with you with it. For that recommendation, though, I would highly recommend you watch the director's cut. And truth be told, almost all of Ridley Scott's movies, I would recommend you watch the director's cut of. So there's that. Another one on my list I didn't mention because I don't think we can actually find it to watch it is Heaven's Gate. And Heaven's Gate is a movie by Michael Cimino, who did The Deer Hunter and The Sicilian, and it famously bankrupted the production company that funded it. It was over embellished, but I saw it, and it is long, but fascinating. Incredibly fascinating. I don't think it's something that I could say would be rewatchable.
I've seen it as well, and I would have to agree with you, but I've only saw it the once, and it was I forget what class I was in, but I think it was socialism, and or like she taught us about socialism, but it was about economics and society, and she showed us a whole bunch of shit, but that was one of them. Deer Hunter was another, and another one was Freaks and Geeks. Jadapato's.
That's interesting.
blossoming.
There's a lot of.
She was she was a good teacher.
I also considered the 2016 Ghostbusters because I ride hard for that movie, and I don't. But again, when I looked at the numbers, even though it came up in
Ghostbusters?
articles as a flop and a blockbuster bust, it did recoup. But
Greater.
even if
but
even
home video thing, but we're talking about box office.
it.
And you know how I feel about.
But I'll find a way to talk about that.
Who you
I'll
gonna
find
call?
What's that?
Who you gonna call?
Oh, you're gonna call the Ghostbusters.
I love it.
But those are the other major ones that I considered. There are some other titles here, but I know that we'll be able to talk about them on some other topic.
we'll fit
So,
in that.
Tennille, it looks
Yeah.
like we've got the dice heading to you. So
Okay.
we've got 12 titles here. And the 12 titles tonight, this is going to be a good one. The 12 titles tonight are Shawshank Redemption,
In no particular order.
The Hunted, Babylon, What Dreams May Come, Mortal Engines, Wet Hot American Summer, Almost Famous, Fight Club, The Boondock Saints, Inner Space, Cutthroat Island, and Legend. And Almost Famous.
So many good movies.
Almost Famous is going to be our rewatch. And I am actually really, really excited for that because I
right.
can't remember the last time I've seen
Wait,
it.
now did you randomly number these?
Dude, everything it's random.
Okay.
Life is random.
Because you name them in order. I just want the viewers to know that they're not in order when we roll it.
We're good. It's a good pick tonight. Almost
I'm
Famous.
good for any pick. All those movies are fabulous. They're fantastic.
I'm going to watch Legend, though. I'm going to
I
take that away as
highly
my
recommend it.
homework.
I hope everybody
Wants to
listening
watch all of
watches
these
all
yeah,
of them.
yeah, but
But
that's
we
going to be my
have to
first.
watch that for our next episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
and that's
next time-
Almost Famous should be,
Next
I love
time we
that
will
movie.
talk about Almost Famous. So, Tennille, thank you so much for coming on Unorthodox Film Podcast with us. I hope you enjoyed it.
Such a pleasure having
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you guys for inviting me.
Before we send out, how can people find you? Is there a website or any place that you want to send them to find out more about you?
Yeah, I'm at thefilmchick.com, or you can look me up on Instagram at thefilmchick. And I do have some movies streaming on Tubi, so you can find If I Can't Have You or Chasing the Ghost or Miss Rainbow Magic. on Tubi, and hopefully here later in 2020 you'll be able to see The Agency.
24.
Yes, 2024.
That's okay.
Oh, gosh.
No, that's okay.
It takes us all a while.
I know. Yeah, but it's almost February. I should know better by now.
You know,
We
It's going to be
filmed
worse.
it.
It's going to be worse when this airs because it's going to be like May then. So. No, it'll be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll be closer to releasing The Agency at that time. So
Yeah.
look for some marketing on social media
Yeah.
networks for,
And Joe, how can people find you?
They can find me where I want to be left alone.
Yeah, you can be left alone.
Chaotic_artisan. Look for the mohawk and the beard.
And that's
Film
on Instagram.
creator. That would be the Instagramos. Yes,
Yep.
on the gram.
And you can follow me at Beeford Clark. You can follow the show at UFPodcast. Actually, no, we couldn't get that. It's actually
UFPod.
Our Instagram is at UFO studio.Detroit. I guess we should have figured this out before
I guess you should have, yeah.
Well, it's
Look
just
at that.
because I couldn't get what I wanted, and that's what I had to go with. So it's UFOstudio.Detroit at Instagram. You can also look us up on Facebook, Unorthodox Film Podcast.
You can message us on Gmail. At
Give us a rating.
studio.Detroit.
We would love to see some ratings on our Apple and Spotify. If you enjoy what you hear, you could be generous with those 5 stars and comment and let us know what you thought about our list tonight. What were some titles that you would have mentioned, and tell us about what you thought. Thank you, everybody, and thank you again to Neil.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.